Welcome back in Live Now from Fox. I'm Austin Westfall. Well, there was a presidential election. A lot of chat we're talking about with the U.S. presidential election, but there's another one at hand that we're watching closely, Iran's presidential election. They will hold a runoff presidential election, pitting a little-known reformist against a hardliner former nuclear negotiator after results released Saturday showed the lowest ever poll turnout in the Islamic Republic's history. More than 60% of voters cast no ballot in the race that saw reformist Masoud Pezeshkian best Saeed Jalili, who competed alongside two other hardliners. I want to discuss this and the international implications of it with senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Behnam Ben Taleblu. As always, we appreciate your time. It's good to see you. What do we need to know about both of the candidates that we're discussing here?
It's a pleasure to be with you. I think the first thing to note about any Iranian presidential election, or shall we say selection, is that this is a highly engineered process. The people who have to make it into even the pool of candidates have to go through a vetting process run by Iran's Guardian Council, which is loyal to Iran's supreme leader. And in the past few electoral rounds or contests, you've seen the supreme leader be able to engineer an outcome that continues to shift the already very limited political space in Iran's Islamist and authoritarian political system more and more towards the hard right. And at the same time, it's always worth remembering for an American audience that unlike the American president or French president, the Iranian presidency does not have that full scope of powers at all. In fact, the supreme leader is a title meant to be taken rather literally, and that this person who is slated to be chosen in the next round of this contest in the runoff election is designed actually to continue the policies set out, particularly in the foreign policy space, by the supreme leader and institutions like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So quite often, as you have in these contests, the choices range from quite bad to very bad or even worse. Someone like Pezeshkian is hoping to get a little bit more of a popular boost. But then again, unfortunately, the Islamic Republic doesn't really have a long history of respecting these votes. And what you're seeing in the past few rounds of electoral contests is that there's a significantly diminishing number of people even showing up to vote. In the past, even official statistics in the Islamic Republic were comparatively higher to some of its neighbors, but many of those official ballots that had been cast in the past were often incomplete ballots, or sometimes known as joke ballots, where they would write in someone else's name at the top. Now you have a fundamentally different phenomenon altogether, where for the past half decade, if not decade, it doesn't matter if there's a candidate that's branded as a self-styled reformist or as an ultra-hardliner, like Saeed Jalili. The population is rejecting both sides of this spectrum altogether because they're embracing the street and not the ballot box as a way to change things.
How does a runoff work in this case? When will we know who wins?
It'll be a very short turnaround, in my view. It certainly won't be as long as the previous process, which we should remember is a snap process, because Iran was originally scheduled to have the next round of presidential elections in the summer of 2025. But then the downing of Iranian President Ibrahim Rai's helicopter, which also killed the country's foreign minister, brought everyone to this snap precipice. If you're a regime that is as brittle and as unpopular as the Islamic Republic, you don't like to let these things drag on. So it was a very short period of time. It was about a month where this election was held, and it'll be a matter of a week and a half, in my view, if I have the dates correct, when the new campaign season will begin and will end for these two candidates.
Voter turnout seems to be a big talker of this one. Turnout was low. Are there any explanations for that? Do we know what may have contributed to it?
It's that historic divide that we continue to see in Iran of the state versus the street, or the state versus society. Really, in 2020, you had record low parliamentary election turnout. In 2021, you had the lowest ever presidential election turnout. Then in March of this year, 2024, you had then lowest ever parliamentary turnout. And now you have the lowest ever presidential and any electoral turnout in the 45-year history of the Islamic Republic. So this is a sign. Western policymakers need to wake up to this, that the Iranian population is not even willing to provide the regime in Tehran with that, quote, big leaf of legitimacy. So, now is the time not to pull punches and to stand with the street against the state in that country.
You already touched on this, but I think it's worth driving this home a little more. How fair are elections in Iran? How would you describe their democratic standards?
I would simply say that they're not democratic standards. You know, the name of the country, the Islamic Republic of Iran, according even to an Ayatollah who was supposed to become the next supreme leader, and he was defrocked and put under house arrest till the end of his life. He said the Islamic Republic is neither Islamic nor a republic. It has the theocratic trappings, and it has some, a Republican veneer or an electoral veneer. But in the end, this is like many other third world dictatorships, something that is engineered and top down. So you often hear experts and analysts say that these elections or selections are neither free nor fair. But the regime tries to do something every 4 years. It tries to get the West and to get outside observers to debase itself, to call these things actual elections, to overinvest time into kind of monitoring the outcome, and really miss the forest of the trees, which is that revolution that's been happening on the street and within society.
You know, obviously, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei sits atop the Iranian hierarchy. I want to drive this point home as well. How powerful is the presidency compared to the Supreme Leader?
The presidency has quite a bit of domestic powers, but even there, he's checked by a whole host of elected and unelected institutions. And on all of the issues that matter, particularly the foreign and security policy, the president is not at all the main decision maker of concern here. So these are largely stylistic, in my view, not substantive changes. But I do want to take the time to go back to a previous question now to remind your audience of something, because this is going to round two. And again, this regime in some ways can't afford to let this process linger because it shows how illegitimate it is, because it'll have even less turnout. But what the regime is trying to do now is to spook the population. It has two drastically different presenting candidates that are talking to different segments of Iranian society, and it's trying to engineer massive turnout to benefit from the legitimacy of people going after a self-styled reformist while using that kind of dark cover, that kind of undemocratic cover, to move the system this way towards their preferred hardline candidate. So the regime is going to be trying to have its cake and eat it too in this next much shorter campaign period.
Does it seem that the Supreme Leader has a preferred candidate of the two?
All else being equal, the Supreme Leader has used and abused all different factions and all different sides. So everybody, whether you're a self-styled reformist or you're an ultra hardliner, there is a expiration date for you for the Supreme Leader. Every president in the history of the Islamic Republic since Khamenei became Supreme Leader in 1989, and that man right now is the Middle East's longest continuously serving modern era autocrat to date. Let's not forget that. Has had a falling out with the Supreme Leader. And that tells you something, because, again, that presidential position is largely stylistic and not substantive of the issues of concern for us here.
Yeah, given the stylistic nature of this position, maybe you've already answered the next question I'm going to ask you. What are the implications of this election on the Israel-Hamas war? We all know very well Iran's connection to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others. So what are the implications, if there are any significant ones?
Well, the fact that the Iranian president doesn't control the main levers of power and isn't in charge of the tone or the tenor or the pace with which the Islamic Republic continues to be able to quite literally get away with murder in the Middle East, it tells you one thing, that a lot of these labels that we have, like president or parliamentary speak, don't actually convey the same power that the Western equivalents of these labels make. So I want to stress that point for the audience as well. So it'll have essentially zero effect on the way the regime is continuing to use its proxies in places like Lebanon with Hezbollah, its proxies in places like Yemen with the Houthis, as well as the myriad Shia militias that are both in Iraq and Syria, who have been increasingly firing at the Jewish state.
All right, Behnam, we'll leave it there for now. As always, we appreciate your insight. Take care.